Welcome to Providing Choice, a Florida Charter School Alliance podcast. This is Lynn, Norman-Teck, Executive Director of the Alliance, and your host for today's episode. We got a chance to speak with Charles Gibson recently. We talked about the charter school movement in Florida, what has changed since the inception of charter schools 25 years ago, and an amazing neighborhood charter school. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Welcome, Charles. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. Before we talk about charter schools and everything education choice, will you introduce yourself to those that are watching us?
Sure. Charles Gibson, from Miami, born and raised. I went to the University of Illinois for undergrad and University of Miami for law school. And I've been a part of the charter school movement for about 20 years at this point. In different capacities, as a board member, board chair, as the attorney representing different charter school networks and individual schools. Also consulting on certain schools who are starting and people who are interested in starting charter schools. Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit of background about myself.
That's great. That's a lot. So this year we're celebrating 25 years of charter schools in Florida. It's amazing that we've come this far. Can you give us a perspective, because you've been involved for 20 years, and what have you seen? How have you seen the movement evolve in Florida?
Well, I think that it's from different perspectives. So from the perspective of a parent, I think that there's so much more choices in education. And what I mean by that is public school education, because as you know, Lynn, and those who are listening, charter schools are public schools. And so we've seen an evolution of how schools are providing educational services to students and parents and families. And so it's almost like everybody has to step up their game, right? So before, if you had a school that was trying to retain its students, it was pretty easy. If I don't know, you and I are in the same age demographics, and if you wanted to go to a good school, you had to get like an M&M transfer, or you had to get to being involved in I don't know if they had magnets then, but I know that they had specialty schools. So you had to go to those schools and get applied for that. But at this point, there's so much specialties and so many programs that have been available because of charter schools, because you're trying to find a niche that will really fit your child. That's really been the explosion. And so the evolution has been, we were mirroring charters, we were mirroring public schools, traditional public schools, let me say that. And then public schools, there was competition. So some schools had to offer certain programs that was distinct. So it was more of trying to distinguish your individual school from other schools. And because of that, the evolution has been to be more distinct, to be more unique. And that's what we're seeing now.
Absolutely. And you talked about the parent perspective, because that has a lot to do with it, because the parents drive those characteristics of a school. Because if nobody wants it, nobody's going to come.
That's true.
Yeah. So you do see the language programs in STEM and all of that. And that's very exciting. One thing also, I remember in the kids my age, the parents would move to a better neighborhood. Which is incredibly prohibitive for some people. And charters it kind of eliminated that, because you can go to any school. So you said you've been part of the movement for 20 years. And how did that start? What was your introduction to?
So my introduction was, it's interesting, because we were trying to get a project kicked off in Coconut Grove. And initially, the land that we had acquired was going to be for a early childhood education program. And when we initially, so we had started that project probably about 5 years prior to, and we had noticed that the demographics had shifted because St. Albans, which is a couple of, say about maybe half a mile away from the project that we were working on, they had saw a reduction in their student count. But when we started the project, they had an overflow. And so because it seemed that in this particular area, there was not as many students as they were when we initially started the project, we had to kind of rethink the project. But then those kids, so there was a reduction in early childhood education, Head Start and daycares. But then there was a larger, that same older group who stayed in the public school system at Tucker and Coconut Grove Elementary and leading on to Ponce. And so there was a glut of kids there. So that's where the shift came. And we were approached by Academica. Well, initially we were approached by another woman who thought that a charter school, again, we didn't really know what the concept was, but we understood that it was a school, a part of the public school system, and it wasn't a private school. So we kind of knew that, but the person who we used, who I won't name, just didn't get the job done. And then we reached out to, it's weird. It's not that we reached out to them. We met by happenstance because we were in the Miami-Dade County Public School auditorium, or I think it was a board meeting. And the person who was trying to get it for us just was kind of bungling it. And Academica crew was there for their own project. And we just kind of met and there was synergy there. And so then we moved forward with them. And that's how we got introduced to it. We started talking, and we opened up a charter school here in the Grove. And that's kind of on our organizational level. But from a personal level, because I was an attorney and there was really no attorneys who were doing charter schools and education. Well, they were doing education law, but not really charter schools. The door was open. And so you in any new industry, you kind of learn as you go. It's the Wild Wild West. So there weren't a lot of, I say charter school legislation, I say charter school law, but there was no charter school law. Like it didn't exist. And so we were kind of stumbling through it. And that's kind of how I got drawn in. And then next thing you know, clients were referred because they knew that I was working with charter schools and I was working with Academica. And then Academica introduced me to some of their individual networks, and it was synergy there. And it just kind of grew over time. And I was able to, still am, meet a lot of people who are truly about the business of education. I think that's one of the criterias that I have learned along the way, is that those who are not about the business of education, trying to get kids better, trying to move them forward, then they're not people who are really for the movement, for trying to impact in a positive way the youth.
Yeah. And you're very humble when you say we were trying to start a charter school, but you come from a long line of social activism and equality. So when we're talking about the Grove, for those who don't know, it's founded by people of color, has always been, but struggling. And you and your grandmother were trying to start this school. You started the Gibson Charter School, named after Theodore and Thelma, your grandparents. Do you want to talk a little bit about the we that you mentioned? Because that's a really big part of this too. And it drives, I think, your passion for education.
Well, I think I try not to, and I guess this isn't the forum for that more. So because you and I have known each other for years, it's almost like a conversation, and it's not a, putting on airs. But my family has been in the civil rights movement since the beginning of whatever, right? Since the beginning of Miami. And so, like you said, the Coconut Grove is a subdivision in the city of Miami. And in fact, a lot of people don't know, but Coconut Grove is older than the city itself. The another fact that people don't know is that the majority, like a third, I say about a third of the incorporators of the city of Miami were blacks, and the majority of those blacks were from Coconut Grove. And when I mean incorporators, there's a document, what they call is the city charter, and they needed a certain amount of residents who would sign off to want to incorporate, to start a city. And you needed a certain amount of people. And but for those blacks who signed on as incorporators, the city would not be existing. It probably would have eventually, but not in that window of time. But to more specifically dealing with my family, my grandmother and grandfather, they've always, my grandfather's passed, but my grandmother is still with us. And they've always been about civil rights, but more in a broader sense, trying to improve the lives of the people in the city of Miami and in Miami-Dade County. And the charter school is just an extension of that. It's a component of trying to have parents and students to have better choices, or really the ability to make choices for themselves and their families. And so, again, the we is my grandmother, myself, and I stand on her shoulders. My grandfather, who she stands on her shoulders, on his shoulders, and it's just a continuing legacy of civic involvement and trying to get people lives better and in a better place.
Absolutely. And education is definitely that door of opportunity. I know that was pushed for you, not only to study, but you are fluent in Spanish too.
Yes.
So it makes sense that the charter school came next. So describe the Gibson Charter School. It's a K-8 now, right?
It's a K-8, and right now we're in Overtown, and we have about close to 200 students, and it's a small niche school. We're really serving those people who are truly in need, and I think all charter schools are doing that. But I think that in this particular instance, in that particular area, there's families who are truly have, I don't want to say problems, but they have different paths in life that haven't been as easy as it has been for others. And and I think in that particular area, and it's not a reflection of the other school systems. I just think that in that particular environment, people have been left behind, and it's not that the society has failed them, but to a certain extent, I think that they just haven't been given the opportunity to succeed in ways that other communities have. And so we try to cater to that. A majority of our students are housed in homeless shelters. And I take that back, not a majority, but the good percentage, a large percentage. And we have students whose families come from single family homes. And I hate to use that as an excuse because I came from a single family home. My father passed away when I was 5. So that doesn't mean that we had struggles, but it does mean that there's one less voice in the house, And so what we try to do at the school is try to be that second voice or that third voice in the house to help children and families. And one of the visions that we have for the school is to be all encompassing, right? So we have families who we provide the breakfast, lunch, and we try to provide snack, which is not a dinner, but at least it keeps something in their belly when they get home. And the goal is to try to have all of the services wrapped around. So what we've incorporated at the school is a partnership with OYC, which is the Overtown Youth Center. And they brought in some of their resources so that when the kids get out of school, it's not an aftercare per se, but there is resources that are there after the school day is over to try to help the children, not just with homework, but also with uh, um, um, so it is with homework, but it's also with social services, um, helping parents uh, to find employment, helping parents if they need any type of medical, if they need, we're not doctors, but we try to counsel them and put them in the right place. And because we're such a small school, we can take that personal approach with them that I think other schools can't, traditional public schools and charter schools. And I think that that's what has been needed in that area. Um, um, the downside is that it's resource intensive, meaning that there's a lot of resources that have to be poured in because technically you're supplementing what is missing in the household.
Mm-hmm.
We try to supplement that with the services that we provide in-house with the school and outside services that we try to provide there as well.
Yeah. And I visited that campus several times, and you said it was small, but it does feel like a family. Mm-hmm. Like there's a very one-on-one attention paid to those students and the parents. That's definitely a benefit. So do you have any stories that you'd like to share about the school? You don't have to name names, but any success stories? There's so
well, we have. It's interesting because a lot since we're a K-8, we don't. It's not that we lose sight of the students, but the kids move on to high school, and so we try to stay in touch with them as much as we can. I mean, they're because we've been in existence for about 16, 17 years at this point. I do run into some former students who will say, hey, Mr. Gibson, I haven't seen you in a while. And kids who are in the Grove, because initially the school started here. And I feel like I'm old myself because they have children. And so you see kids who you've groomed and spoken to and nurtured, and now they're the parents. I mean, their children aren't old enough to enroll in the school right now. Well, maybe some of them are, but meaning their children's children, right? Well, their children aren't there, but they're almost there. So, but individual stories, nothing really stands out. There's kids who you just have personal relationships with and who you've seen have grown, and now they're taking care of themselves and they're on their feet. But that's really, those are the stories that, or the instances that I see.
Okay. That's beautiful. You talked a little bit about your partnership with other charter schools, and you and I have had this conversation before where the critics say, oh, those charter schools are a burden on districts. They don't have enough accountability. But from an attorney's perspective, can you talk about that accountability? Because it's up there.
Yeah. I think that what people, and I don't want to sound, when people make statements like that, I just feel like they're truly coming from a place of ignorance, right? They just don't know the nuts and bolts of how charter schools are run. There's plenty of times or plenty of instances where people have come up and say basically what you just said, and said that they're stealing money. It's just to feed for-profit entities, and they're making the money off the backs of taxpayers, and it's ridiculous. I mean, the analogy I always give is that education is a business, and the business is to educate, right? You are in the business to educate students. If you fail to perform, then you will be out of business. And the performance matrix is, graduation rates. The performance matrix is success on exams. And so these matrices or measurements or accountability statistics are given to us, and we have to abide by that. And we're on equal playing field. Yeah. And so the analogy I always give is, you wouldn't make the argument for a person who the state would contract to build a bridge. So you hire a general contractor, he builds the bridge, and once the bridge is done, you pay him. So it's the same thing with education. you hire a school to educate children. Once the children are educated, you pay them. And so it doesn't make any sense that if you are performing at if you are doing your job or the job of educating better than others, and you're doing it for less, and you're getting either the same or better results, you should be penalized for that. It makes no sense, you know. And so from a legal point of view, again, we have accountability, and it's all public record. So if a charter school is not performing, they should be shut down. But I think, you know, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. If a public school is not performing, they need to be shut down. You know, and so it can't be a one-sided argument. And I think people fail to realize that when schools don't perform, they are out of business. And again, the business matrix is how well are students doing. If the students are doing well, it is what it is. Let them continue. Parents are happy. Again, what you said earlier, if parents aren't happy, they're taking their kids out. And if you don't have any students at a school, then you won't have a school, regardless if you're the best school in the world. So there's accountability from a legal point of view. There's an accountability from a parent point of view. You can have the best principal in terms of X's and O's. And what I mean by that is the best teachers, the best program. But if she has a bad attitude and the teachers don't take into account parents' concerns, parents are going to leave. So you can have an A school, but if you don't have any students, it doesn't matter. So, you know, but in the public school sphere, the principal, and I don't think this happens, but theoretically, the principal could not address some of the parents' concerns, and the school will remain open. You know, and so, you know, it's kind of a double standard, but from an accountability point of view, we're all the same. From a legal point of view, there's no shenanigans going on, and if there are, we have to submit reports of what we're doing with these funds. These are all public dollars, and they're a public record and available to the public for scrutiny. And so when you see stuff in the paper and when you hear people make these comments about they're stealing money, I mean, they haven't opened up the books. They haven't done their own research. And more to the point, I think as a society, and it's more of a reflection of society, and maybe it's always been this way, but this is what I've observed in the last 10 or 15 years. People want to be spoon-fed information. They don't want to look for themselves. So if somebody tells you something that doesn't make any sense, you don't want to verify it. It's easier for you to just repeat it, you know? And so that's what kind of continues in this of where we are today, specifically about charter schools, that charter schools are stealing money. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. You think if we were stealing, if charter schools were stealing that amount of money, you think there wouldn't be indictments or people going to jail? Are you kidding me? Really? So, but yeah, I sometimes I go off on a tangent about it because I'm passionate about it. I know the hard work that these principals. I think the charter school principals are some of the most amazing people in the world. I mean, the juggling act that they have to do on a daily basis, not a monthly or annual, a daily basis, is just phenomenal. And I think that the skill sets that they have could rival any CEO in America.
Oh, absolutely.
So
yeah, I always say, and I worked for county government, I said, you know, they're like a mayor of a city. They've got all of these stakeholders that they have to please, and a budget and sunshine law, and accountability on student performance and keeping teachers and professional development for the AC breaks down. I mean, they are amazing people, especially during the pandemic. We saw it where they made decisions that no one had prepared them for.
Yeah.
And you're also on the board of the Gibson Charter School, correct? So you see it from a board member's perspective too.
Right. So I'm currently the board chair, and I've been the board chair for most of its existence. I stepped down for a while and just became a board member because I think you should rotate leadership. But from a board member's perspective, again, you see it. You see the ins and outs. I mean, you don't see all the day-to-day because I just don't believe that boards should be involved in the day-to-day operations. They're policy driven. And so from a policy point of view, we see that the policy that we have approved has been implemented. Yeah. So from that point of view, yeah, and it's gratifying, right? You're bettering kids. You have a direct influence over families and children to make their lives better. Yep. And if that's not good enough, I mean, you're in the wrong business, right? I mean, that's what you wake up in the morning for, to try to make your neighbor's lives better than it was yesterday.
Yeah. I love that. I'm so glad I recorded this conversation, because plenty of times we've had it not recording, but now I have all these amazing sound bites. So thank you so much.
Oh, cool.
Did we leave anything out?
No, I don't. I mean, this, not really. I mean, again, it's almost like, I feel like we are having lunch, right? Like we sit down and we kind of talking, and you know, it's we can talk about anything. I mean, you and I could probably talk forever. Yeah. But in terms of the charter school, I don't think we left anything out. I think that, you know, overall, this has been a good move for us, the state, our schools, our school districts. We're making each other better, you know. So and in that process, we're helping students and families. So.
And that's it. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Well, thank you so much, Charles.
Cool. Good to see you.
All right, good.
All right, take care.
All right.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Providing Choice. For more about the Gibson Charter School or any charter school in Florida, visit our website, FL Charter Alliance.